From stories to the east and tales to the west, from those who work in shadows and those who can't find rest. Join me as we look at some of the most interesting, mysterious, unexplained, and unfortunate stories that have ever been told. I'm your host, Nicholas Dagger, and welcome to Tales from the Den. Scuba diving. Scuba diving is a relatively safe sport enjoyed by many people who love the water and the adventure. That being said, cave diving comes with heightened risks. Cave diving is for the most adventurous of scuba divers, for those who are willing to push their boundaries to their absolute limits. This type of diving combines the claustrophobic subterranean with the exhilaration of caving and the added risk of scuba diving. It may be dangerous, but the people who enjoy it love to partake in the risk and the thrill and the exhilaration that they experience from doing this sport. Join me as we look at some of the most tragic and unfortunate cave diving stories. Bushmans Hole. Bushmans Hole is said to be the deepest underwater cave in the world, found in South Africa, laying low at 271 meters. Scuba diver and cave diver David Shaw was cave diving in Bushmans Hole. During his first dive there, he came across the remains of a fellow cave diver who died there in 1994. He tried to recover the remains, but at the time, it was impossible. Later, when he went back to the mainland, he contacted the victim's father and swore that he would try again to recover his remains. In January of 2005, Shaw embarked on his promise that he made and returned to the cave. It took Shaw 10 minutes to drop to the base of the cave at 271 meters down. Shaw had a camera on him at the time, and in the video footage taken by Shaw, it unfortunately shows the tragic death of David Shaw whilst trying to retrieve the remains of the victim that he found there prior. Unfortunately, he filmed his own death. Shaw went down first to send up the remains of the victim that he found there. A support diver dropped to 250 meters to try to retrieve Shaw, but his computer systems were breaking down and he had to ascend. Days later, divers went to retrieve the remains of Shaw and his equipment and discovered both bodies just 20 meters down. That of Shaw attached to the nylon support line that Shaw was attempting to use to retrieve the remains of the prior victim. In 2014, 2 divers were taken by a 100-meter deep cave system in Norway. In this tale, it was a case of entanglement and panic which led to fatalities. The start of the cave is quite simple. You enter the pond in Plura and swim underground for 500 meters to the first cave. It's a well-known and beautiful dive for recreational diving, but there are more cave systems connected and are quite dangerous. Going deeper in the cave through narrow channels, pitch black, and ice-cold water, and you reach one of the most dangerous sections of the cave. It is advised that only the very skilled of cave divers ventured to this section. The story goes as this. A group of 5 set out to dive that day, but only 3 returned. At 110 meters deep, the leading diver, named Grongevist, realized that the second diver accompanying him wasn't behind him. He turned around and found the second diver tangled in the cord used to pull themselves through the water. He was using his underwater torch to alert of his distress. Grongevist gave him a cylinder of gas to reduce his carbon dioxide exposure. But while he was changing his mouthpiece, he swallowed water uncontrollably. The second diver died in front of his eyes, and Grongevist couldn't free the body. Despite his best attempts, he had to carry on. Due to this delay, Grongevist had to add a few hours to his decompression. Otherwise, it would have severely injured him or possibly killed him. But eventually, he surfaced safely and unharmed. 3 more divers followed. A diver named Ratinen was next, and he managed moving past the fellow deceased diver's dead body. Another diver named Usamaki panicked at the scene. Ratinen was the final diver and tried to assist Usamaki, but without success, as Usamaki, while panicking, unfortunately drowned. Ratinen eventually returned the way that he came, and unfortunately having to leave his 2 friends behind, and they were, at the time, unable to retrieve the bodies. Shane Thompson became a victim of New Mexico's Blue Hole in April of 2016. Thompson was a member of the ADM Exploration Foundation, who were given rare permits to explore the underwater caves, which were sealed for 40 years. At the bottom of the spring, there's a metal grate that stops divers from going too deep. It was placed in 1976 after 2 training divers had drowned Beneath the grating, there's a maze of twisting and turning caves. The foundation came to the Blue Hole in 2013 in an attempt to further explore the Blue Hole beyond the grating. It took many attempts before they could remove the rocks above the grating, but on the fateful day in question, Thompson was supposed to be on safety duty outside the cave while a fellow cave diver entered. For unknown reasons, Thompson went in after him. The other cave diver tried to exit following a safety line, but mud and debris had been stirred up and there was no visibility. Thompson pulled the line so hard that the other cave diver, unfortunately, let go. Then as he was feeling for the line, Thompson became wedged against the fellow cave diver in a narrow passage about 35 meters deep. They eventually freed themselves, but something went wrong, and Thompson started to panic. He took a wrong turn and ended up in an unmapped section of the cave leading to nowhere. He unfortunately was trapped. The other cave diver eventually found Thompson, but he was already dead. And although a tragedy, Thompson's family later said that they knew he died doing what he loved, as he was diving and exploring the ocean depths at a very young age, and has spent his life working in the industry. After Thompson's death, the fellow diver announced that the cave was too unsafe and said they should be sealed for good. He later mentioned that they were the most dangerous caves the Foundation had ever dived in. In 1991, there was a mysterious cave diving tragedy where two diving buddies, Mr. Turner and Mr. Gavin, were mapping caves in Indian Springs, located in Florida. But unfortunately, only one came back. During their dive, currents stirred and sand and mud covered the visibility, and unfortunately, the visibility only got worse. 30 meters down, they tried to ascend, but the passage out of the cave was blocked. Gavin managed to force his way out, but when he returned for his friend, he was nowhere to be seen. 4 divers who had already exited the water saw the water level seem to have mysteriously dropped, then seemed to have kicked up all the sand and mud from below. Following the disaster, the diving and geological communities were in question about what exactly had happened. Having spent years designing a scientific experiment to explore all of the possibilities, in September of 2015, over 20 years after this incident, Doran Knopf, a professor of physical oceanography at Florida State University, concluded what may have happened. The problem arose when the divers were doing their decompression stops. They were ascending within an air pocket, causing gas bubbles to rise to the upper surface of the cave. Buoyancy levels in the cave had changed. It had affected the stability of the rock and sediment in the walls and ceiling of the cave, so loose that the limestone within the cave fell from the walls and ceilings of the cave, blocking the narrow passage below. This is what caused the blocking of their passageway, and of course, the stirring up of the bottom, causing total visibility blackout, and unfortunately led to the death of a fellow diver. Agnes Milwaukee, a stunt diver, tragically died while exploring a cave in 2011. Angie, as people called her, just 29 years old, was exploring the labyrinth of tunnels at Tank Caves in Australia, and unfortunately lost her life. Milwaukee was an adventurous cave diver who loved exploring to an obsessive degree. Her skilled cave diving abilities led to her involvement in many documentaries and diving projects. Mount Gambier in South Australia is famous for its complex combination of sinkholes, caves, and kilometers of underground waterways. Tank Caves requires expert navigation through tight restrictions and often limited visibility. A lot of the cave system is very fragile. The walls and ceilings are soft to the touch, and you have to breathe very carefully. If you exhale too hard, the bubbles displace the ceiling, which then will fall on you, causing bad visibility, or worse, the small restrictions will become even tighter. Milwaukee dived at Tank Caves many times and knew it very well. Yet, somehow during her last dive, she became separated from her diving partner. She became lost after stirring up the sand and mud from the cave's walls and floor. She wasn't quite able to find her way out of the cave and ran out of air while doing so, and unfortunately died. Evidence suggests she remained very calm until her last breath. On the day she died, no one's sure of exactly what happened. She appeared to leave her diving partner and never returned. They identified the location she was last seen, but never understood what caused her to die. The following day, her body was recovered about 500 meters from the entrance of the cave. Cave diving isn't easy. It's a discipline only for the most meticulous of divers. And if you're prepared to take on the risks, the magical underwater world of the caves awaits you. Thanks for watching. Until next time.